So I was going through some old videos and I just so happened to come across one. Um, Michael Bloomberg. And this is before he ever got into the race. We've already covered Bloomberg, tax the poor, help them live longer. We need to tax their bad and unhealthy habits so it helps them make better, more well-informed decisions. They can live longer, live happier lives, the whole 9 yards on that, right? Okay. So we all know about that. Well, obviously one of the things that I've talked about on this channel is the issue of why marijuana is still illegal in this country. Okay? Now, whether you want to smoke it or not, that's a personal choice. I'm not advocating anyone do it. I've just been saying for a long, long time it's very, very stupid as to why it is still illegal considering, cigarettes, alcohol, all those things are illegal. And, of course, I've given my take on it in the past. I'll be giving my take on it again. But first, I want to let you hear straight from the billionaire jackass's mouth just what his take on legalizing marijuana is. Let's take a listen.
We have a different kind of problem in America, for example. Last year, in 2017, 72,000 Americans OD'd on drugs. In 2018, more people than that are ODing on drugs, have OD'd on drugs. And today, incidentally, we are trying to legalize another addictive narcotic, which is perhaps the stupidest thing anybody's ever done. We've got to fight that, and that's another thing that Bloomberg Philanthropies will work on in public health.
First of all, trying to legalize another addictive narcotic. Blew me. Marijuana ain't addictive, my friend. Now, depending on who you talk to about that subject, you will get different views. Some say it is, some say it isn't. Let me break this down for you, okay? A few years back, I'll tell you where I learned this, okay? A few years back, I was about 14, 15, something like that. I got caught by a cop smoking a Newport at the school bus stop. Now, me and a couple of kids around the block, we would always smoke early in the morning at the bus stop, And they had already finished theirs. I got out there late and I just started on mine. Wasn't paying any attention. I was sitting there running my mouth. Cop drove right by me. Saw me smoking, got out, ID'd me. Underage, wrote me a ticket, blah, 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 blah. Got in touch with my parents. Yada, yada, yada. Okay. So, as a result, I had an option. I either had to pay a hefty ticket price. Yeah, he wrote this crap on a traffic ticket, by the way. So I either had to do that, or I had to go and pay pay and take a class called a SADAC, I think it was. And I have no clue what it even stands for at this point. Pretty much the gist of this class was to try and scare people out of ever smoking, dipping, doing drugs, things like that. And it would go through all the harms that it does to your body, X, Y, and Z. And I did actually learn quite a few things in that class, like the fact there's over 4,000 chemicals in one cigarette. And then one thing that reassured me, I would never dip or chew tobacco. The fact that apparently, and those of you who doubt me on this, look it up at your own discretion, but apparently if you dip long enough, it can cause a fungal type of hair to grow on your tongue. Yeah, looking at pictures of that will turn your stomach. But if you don't believe me, by all means, feel free to Google it, and I hope you have a trash can nearby. Okay? But when they got around to the use of marijuana, the argument was made was that while it does not have the same addiction that other drugs will give you, or even like, say, alcohol may give you. It may not have the same addiction. You can get addicted to it in the sense that, or really of two ways. One, you either just enjoy getting high and you want to do it all the time. So there's just the mental addiction there that you just want to do it because it's something that you truly enjoy. Okay. The other addiction that actually takes a toll on your body. Now, I've known plenty of people that smoked for plenty of years, many years, and they say this has never happened to them. But then again, you have to ask, well, how long did you stop smoking to find out? So, I mean, there's a variable in there, how long did they give themselves a reprieve from it? But basically what I was told is that the only addiction that you can really get that it pertains to your body whatsoever is that the fact that your brain produces a chemical, dopamine. It's also found when you smoke, marijuana. You get dopamine from it. You're giving your brain an overload of dopamine and whatnot. And when your brain takes in too much of that chemical, after a certain point in time, it eventually reaches the point where it says, I either don't need to make this chemical or I don't need to make as much. And that's pretty much a chemical that controls your mood. It makes you happy. Things like that. And so if you take in such a large amount of this stuff that your brain goes into a state of shock because you've just smoked and smoked and smoked and smoked and consumed and consumed and consumed, if it eventually makes it to the point where your brain says, I don't need to produce this anymore, and then all of a sudden one day you just go cold turkey and quit, you were probably very liable to fall into a state of depression from it because your brain's not going to know how to react. It's like, wait a minute. Where did this go? And it doesn't just flip a switch and start producing again. It can cause some issue in that department. Now, I have not tried and gone out into the world and do a ton of research on that. That's just the only argument I've ever heard as to how it, can be any way, shape, or form addictive. Okay. If that's false and someone has evidence of that, by all means, post it below. I haven't taken the time to go out and do a ton of homework because to me, quite frankly, it doesn't really matter. I mean, there's plenty of other addictive things that have already been made legal in the world. Last time I checked, you can become an alcoholic, and that's been legal for quite some time. Okay? People are addicted to smoking real bad. Okay? They will literally smoke themselves into a grave smoking cigarettes. Okay? So if we're going to allow that, to me, this is no different. And the biggest reason why is simply the fact that, again, it doesn't have the same side effects. You won't get the shakes from not, smoking pot after so long. Okay. But the other things are all the things that can be done with marijuana. Now, we've gone through this list in the past. Not many people know historically, and I credit Jesse Ventura for actually teaching me this one with his book, Marijuana Manifesto. Okay? We were basically ordered by the British when we were colonies to grow marijuana. In fact, if the way the system is set up today was around during the time of the Founding Fathers, they'd be locking up people like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson because they grew marijuana and hemp. Okay? So, again, the British mandated we grow this product because it was used mainly for things like rope and ship sails. It was made out of the hemp fiber. Hemp fiber was known for being a very strong and sturdy material. Okay? Not many people know that it was used for a lot of the paper back in those days. Okay, so paper was a big thing that came from the hemp plant. Okay, it was a very big product a long time ago in this country, and it was really only buried and replaced as far as the clothing and things were concerned. It was later replaced more so by cotton after the invention of the cotton gin because it made processing cotton fibers so easy that it made it hard to say, well, we want to go through this rigorous process of trying to, still use hemp when cotton is so easy at this point. So that was a big reason why the whole cotton boom really even happened in the first place. And of course, as we've said before, it was only after the invention of the decorticator, a machine that could process hemp fibers almost nearly as good as cotton, and people were saying that hemp was going to be the next big product on the market, and that invest now before you miss your opportunity. Okay. It was shortly after that the, racial loaded hit pieces started taking place by people like William Randolph Hearst and others. Okay. Now, that being said, he used Hearst publications and lobbied the federal government, lobbied them to make it illegal, used many racial attacks and, slurs, and really used racial bigotry propaganda as a attack piece to try and make more or less white people afraid of this product, saying that it was something that the Mexicans smoked that made them so lazy. It's something that black people smoked and made them, it was devil's weed. The black people smoke it, and that's what made them, run around going crazy and raping white women. Okay, so that is what was used during that time period to demonize it to that point that the federal government eventually made it illegal. Now, if you get even deeper into the weeds, you find out that William Randolph Hearst owned a load of timber outside, and trees and timberland, okay? And he wanted to sell and use that, basically sell off, trees to be cut down to make paper out of, so on and so forth. It was infringing on part of his business if they were to go back to making stuff out of, hemp instead of the more modern way. And so he shot it down for a variety of reasons, okay? So for all of you out there who will know, you can always thank William Randolph Hearst for why we have what we have today as far as marijuana is concerned. Now that we've gone through the history of it, now that we've broke down the addictive issue, now let's talk about what he's saying in regards of people ODing. That is a apples to oranges comparison if I've ever heard one. Okay, first of all, you will not find any example of someone smoking marijuana and simply ODing from just, and I emphasize just, smoking marijuana. Now, laced crap, that is not within our column here, folks. You can't add other drugs into marijuana and still say, oh, no, that's not how this works, okay? And before anyone jumps on the whole black market e-cig thing where that was like some kind of THC cartridge, sure. But again, we're not talking about regular marijuana. We're talking about artificially made black market products. You can't count that into this argument either. Traditional, good old ganja, okay? No one has ever OD'd from just using this. There's no way you could consume enough to OD. You would pass the hell out, okay? You could not reach that point, okay? So all these people that have been ODing, they haven't been ODing on that, okay? Bob Marley, for God's sakes, never OD'd, and I think that man could probably have hung in there with the best of them when it came to smoking, some pot. Okay. With that being said, all the other drugs that they are ODing on, why are they ODing on those drugs? Well, the big thing that has been going on in the country is things like the opioid epidemic, for example, right? Now, what have we learned about that epidemic there, Mr. Bloomberg? Well, it turns out that in states like Ohio, something Andrew Yang pointed out in a debate recently, there were at one point more opioid prescriptions in the state of Ohio than there were people. There was enough prescriptions floating around in that state to give every man, woman, and child opioids. There was more prescriptions than there were people. That is insane. That is absolutely insane. And if you want to talk about addictiveness and side effects and getting hooked on something that will give you the shakes, look no further than a opioid. Because they will do it quickly. People get hooked on Oxycontin, Xanaxes. It leads them into getting into harder drugs 9 times out of 10. And it has very, very bad side effects. You will get hooked on those drugs. It is a nasty side effect. Let me tell you something. It will tear people's lives apart too. When you get high off of pot, smoking some marijuana, you just want to sit down and eat a bowl of Cheetos or something, man. You don't have a care in the world. All right? But people who get drunk go home, commit domestic violence, go out and, and can become belligerent and violent, go speeding off in a car and get in wrecks. Okay? People popping pills, depending on the pill. Some, like Ritalin, for God's sakes. You give somebody that doesn't have ADHD Ritalin, you're giving them some high quality speed here. Okay? Again, that's the kind of crap that people are ODing on. And of course, the big killer here recently, fentanyl. Okay? That's what's really been harming people. But again, now, why are people getting so hooked onto these products? Why is this taking place? Well, it's very simple. Again, as I just said earlier, doctors are writing out prescriptions like, giving out pieces of candy on Halloween over here. It's almost like trick-or-treating to go get opioid prescriptions. They're handing them out hand over fist. Okay? And of course, Big Pharma and the big wealthy donors that are in Big Pharma, things like that, keep fighting back against medical marijuana and the legalization of it because it's going to infringe too much on those pills that are addictive and do come with much worse side effects. They don't want that to get passed because it actually, in many cases, is far more better than the things that they will give you to treat it. For example, do we need to go back and talk about Charlotte's Web and how it helped that little girl? That CBD drop that they were able to put together for that little girl who was having how many seizures a day? If you get the chance, go back and watch one of my earliest videos that I ever made on this channel where I spliced all that together talking about that little girl in Charlotte's Web and how she couldn't get the proper stuff in New Jersey because of, big old Porky Pig himself, Chris Christie. Okay? So, I'm not going to, for time's sake, if you want to see that, go back and check that video out and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about there. That medicine works much better than a lot of the other things that are on the market. They even showed the medicine this little girl used put her in such a loopy, drowsy state. She was basically like a walking zombie, some kind of a vegetable. Okay? And that didn't happen. And just that little bit of CBD that she was getting from that Charlotte's Web remedy was taking her epileptic seizures down to such a degree that it was a massive, massive difference from where she was. I don't remember the statistics off the top of my head here, but I do remember it was a huge, huge difference because she was having over like 100 of these seizures a day, and she went down to like I think somewhere between 10 to 20 just from a few days of using this stuff. Okay, so that's incredible because she wasn't getting that result off of the medication that a doctor had prescribed her, and it turns out that, again, that stuff didn't have as good of an effect on preventing the seizures, but yet it made her a loopy, drowsy mess. Okay? So that really didn't help this little girl out at all. Okay? So that's the medical aspect of it. So for one, the Big Pharma, they don't want to write prescriptions on that stuff. They want to keep it illegal because it's infringing on their profits. It's a natural product. And you don't have to go to the doctor if it's curing any of your ailments and get him to write you prescriptions for the stuff. If it becomes recreational, legal, or whatever, you would have people self-medicating much more. And it goes beyond that. It goes into the cigarette companies, alcohol companies probably, because how many people want to smoke pot as a form of stress relief right now and can't? Okay? Cigarette companies would certainly show their ass in that department. They certainly wouldn't want things like that to happen because there's many people who'd probably quit smoking if they could go smoke some marijuana at the end of the day. Yeah, it's a much better stress reliever than some old cigarettes, okay? Now, on top of all of that, again, why are people, back to one thing I've already said, and I've branched out into those, explanations, but why are people ODing on all that other stuff? Well, it's quite simple. Aside from the prescription issue, there has been such a war against marijuana. Even though you can find it on the street all the time, the opioids have become so common because of the prescriptions that are being written and the things like fentanyl being smuggled into this country and how cheaply made they are and things like that. And because marijuana is still illegal, if you even tried to buy it off the street, it would still be as legal as buying the other stuff. What you find is there is a massive price imbalance in those harsher drugs that are far worse than marijuana ever is. Okay? All those opioids, you can get them much cheaper typically than you can marijuana. Okay? And again, because there's such a war on marijuana and they've targeted it for so long, marijuana prices are relatively high. It's not exactly a very cheap product here. Okay? And when you can get things like these opioids so dirt cheap, this is where they try to make, oh, but marijuana is the gateway drug. Well, as long as it remains illegal, I tell you what, I'll give your argument some credit there, okay? And the reason I'll give it some credit is simply because if someone gets hooked on the idea and they want that stress relief and want to get high, and because it's illegal to still purchase marijuana, and so it's harder to come by because it can't be bought, that even though lots of people have it, you could be skeptical about who you want to buy it from, or if you buy it from the wrong people, they could be lacing it with other things that actually would get you hooked so that you keep returning. Because again, we're buying things off the black market, making criminals rich, and this is not something that the federal government has very much oversight on. Therefore, you really don't know what product you're buying, especially if you don't know the seller very well at all. He could be lacing this thing with some sort of heroin and getting you hooked so that you then get hooked on it, and then you will keep buying from him. That's a serious risk with what's going on out there right now. Okay? So that's problem number one. But problem number two, regardless of how they get hooked, whether it be because it was laced or whether it be because, as I said earlier, they just like getting high, here's where the problem comes in. If they ever hit a spot where they want to purchase and the pot's too high and they don't want to afford the prices, and someone passes them something else, then they start trying these other drugs that are cheaper, blah, 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 and there you go. They get the cheaper stuff, they get the high off of it, it suits their needs, and then their life goes to hell in a handbasket. They are going to become hooked if they remain on that substance long enough. Now, what you have found in places where marijuana has been legalized is that more people have gotten away from smoking cigarettes, okay? More people you've seen a decline in people using all these other drugs because they just simply turned to using the marijuana, okay? So there has been multiple things that have come from the legalization of marijuana that have taken numbers in other departments down, okay? Cigarette sales go down, and all these other drugs are not being sold as common within these places as marijuana is now that it was made legal. Okay, so Mr. Bloomberg, again, you are on the totally opposite side of this argument. Totally, on the wrong side of it completely. And I've just broken down why, okay? So again, here you are, rather than taking time to address the issues that are going on and how the keeping marijuana illegal is contributing to a lot of those other problems, rather than spending your time trying to talk about things like that, you use tactics like fear-mongering and things like that to explain why we should keep marijuana illegal instead, because it is, quote, the stupidest idea ever, I think he said, or something along those lines. But nonetheless, it was like the stupidest thing he'd ever heard of, basically. No, Bloomberg, the more I listen to you, the more I'm starting to be convinced you are one of the stupidest people I've ever heard of.